Hi, I'm Dr. John Anderson and I'm a dissertation supervisor. Generally speaking, your bibliography won't necessarily count to your overall word count, and your appendices won't count. Everything that's in the body of the text through chapter 1 through to 6 or 7, that will count. It's a moot point whether footnotes count towards your overall word count, but often they're so small and so it's often not important. It's generally, we don't want students to go way over their word count. There's normally a guide at 10%. But it's generally speaking, it's good advice to work towards that word count as if that's your guide length. You ought to be able to do everything you need to do in the word count that's stated by the module leader for the dissertation. There can be a little bit of leeway either side of that, so don't worry if you're a little bit under or you're a little bit over, but as soon as you become more than perhaps 1,000 words, 1,500 words over, then that's something you're thinking, how can I edit this down to keep to the appropriate word length? It's often an overlooked area that involves not a huge amount of work, but still a significant amount of work, and it's almost psychologically significant, which you think, I've finished, but then you've not finished, because you have to do the formatting, you have to make sure your bibliography is in the right format, that your page margins are appropriate, that your page numbers work coherently, you're putting something in one document, perhaps rather than lots of individual documents. So, in experience, a bibliography should, if you're not working, okay, the first thing to say is it's great to do your bibliography as you go, all right? Although I give that advice, I don't necessarily always do that myself, and I always have to leave a day and a half to get my bibliography sorted. It's a long-winded, laborious process, so factor that into your time management. In terms of doing the correct paginations, I suppose it depends on how au fait you are with your own word processing package, if you're using Apple or if you're using Word, etc. But don't think I can just rattle this off in an hour. It's going to be half a day probably a little bit longer depending on how technically astute you are.